Story 1. John Hardy Rose was born on January 26, 1958. He was born in a small town in the mountains of North Carolina. His family did not have much money. They lived in poor conditions from the start of his life. His father was a man who drank alcohol every day. The father became very mean and violent when he drank. Almost every night, the father would beat John's mother. He would hit her with his hands. He would throw things at her. John watched this happen many times as a small boy. This was normal life for him. When John was 11 years old, something very bad began to happen. His father started bringing other women to the house. These women were the father's girlfriends outside of marriage. The father forced young John to have sex with these women. John did not want to do this. He was only a child, but his father was violent and cruel. John could not say no. This happened more than once. John learned from his father that hurting other people was acceptable. John stayed in his hometown as he grew older. He did not finish much school. He did not learn a trade or a skill that could get him good work. He took simple jobs when he could find them, but he never had a steady career. As a young man, John got married. He and his wife had 3 sons together. For a time, he tried to be a normal husband and father, but the problems from his childhood did not leave him. He started drinking alcohol, just like his father did. He also started using marijuana and other drugs. The drugs and alcohol made him act in angry and uncontrolled ways. His marriage began to fail because of his drinking and drug use. He could not keep a job for very long. He did not take care of his wife or his sons the way a father should. His behavior got worse over time. At some point in his adult life, John committed a serious crime in the state of Mississippi. He was arrested and charged with attempted rape. The court found him guilty. He was sent to prison in Mississippi. He stayed there for a period of time. While he was in that Mississippi prison, a doctor examined him. The doctor said that John Hardy Rose had a severe mental illness. The illness was real and serious, but no one outside the prison paid much attention to this diagnosis. When John finished his prison sentence, he was released. He went back to North Carolina. After getting out of prison, John moved into an apartment in a small town called Robbinsville. This town is in Graham County, North Carolina. He did not live alone. He lived with his sister and her boyfriend. Their apartment was on the 2nd floor of a building. John did not have a job at this time. He spent his days doing very little. He continued to use drugs and drink alcohol. His mind was not stable because of his mental illness, but he did not get any treatment for it. He lived this way day after day. He did not see his 3 sons very often. His marriage was over. He had no real friends. He stayed in his sister's apartment most of the time. Sometimes he would go outside and walk around the neighborhood, but he kept to himself mostly. That was how John Hardy Rose lived his life before anything else happened. A young woman named Patricia Stewart lived in the same building as John Hardy Rose. She was 24 years old. She was white. Her apartment was on the 1st floor. John's apartment was directly above hers. She had recently gone through a divorce. She wanted to prove that she could live on her own. She was just starting to rebuild her life. John noticed Patricia. He started watching her. He became interested in her. He later claimed that they had a secret relationship. He said Patricia did not want other people to know about it, but Patricia's family and the prosecutors later said this was not true. They said John was actually stalking her. On the night of January 2nd, 1991, John went down to Patricia's apartment. It was very late. The time was after midnight, so it was early in the morning of January 3rd. John was already using drugs. He had smoked marijuana. He had also drunk a quart of whiskey. A quart is a large bottle. He drank all of it. He was not thinking clearly because of the drugs and alcohol. While John was in Patricia's apartment, someone else came to visit her. It was a friend of Patricia's. Patricia asked John to leave for a little while. She told him to come back later. John left the apartment. He went back upstairs to his own apartment. He waited. Later, he went back down to Patricia's apartment. He entered again. Now it was very early in the morning of January 3rd, 1991. A conversation started between John and Patricia. John told Patricia that he was planning to go back to Alabama. He said he was going to return to his girlfriend who lived there. Patricia did not like hearing this. According to what John later told the police, Patricia became angry. She said she would call the police and report him for rape if he tried to leave her. John later said this threat made him snap. He said, "I just went crazy." John attacked Patricia. He did not use a gun. He used a knife. He stabbed her multiple times. The medical examiner later counted the wounds. There were 5 stab wounds in total. 4 of them were in her body. The 5th stab wound was in her head. That wound was so strong that the knife went through her skull. John also beat her. He also choked her. He did all these things until she was dead. After Patricia stopped moving, John knew he had to hide what he did. He took the bedsheets from her bed. He wrapped her body inside the sheets. Then he carried the wrapped body out of her apartment. He took it to his own car. His car was a blue Pontiac. He opened the trunk. He put Patricia's body inside the trunk. Then he closed the trunk. But when he tried to start the car, the engine would not turn on. The Pontiac would not start. John could not drive away with the body. So he left the body in the trunk. He went back inside Patricia's apartment. He tried to clean up the blood. He wiped surfaces. He did his best to remove signs of what had happened. But he missed some small spots. Then he went back to his own apartment. He took the knife he had used. He cleaned the knife. He put it inside a box in his bedroom. The next evening came. That was the evening of January 3rd, 1991. John went to his sister. He asked to borrow her car. Her car was a yellow Ford. His sister said yes. John took the keys. He went to his blue Pontiac. He opened the trunk. He took Patricia's wrapped body out of his car. He carried it to his sister's yellow Ford. He put the body inside the trunk of the Ford. Then he drove the Ford away from the apartment building. He drove to a farm. The farm belonged to his grandmother. It was in a rural area. He drove behind the farmhouse. He got out of the car. He found his grandmother's gardening tool called a hoe. A hoe is a long stick with a metal blade at the end. It is used to dig in dirt. John used the hoe to dig a hole in the ground. The hole was shallow. It was not very deep. He put Patricia's body into the hole. Then he poured gasoline over the body. Gasoline is a liquid that burns easily. He lit the gasoline on fire. The fire burned the body. He watched it burn. Then he walked away from the hole. The fire went out by itself after some time. John came back to the hole. He covered the burned body with rocks. He put leaves on top of the rocks. He put tree branches on top of the leaves. The body was now hidden. John drove back to the apartment building. He returned his sister's car. He did not tell anyone what he had done. A few days passed. People noticed that Patricia Stewart was not seen anywhere. She did not answer her phone. She did not go to work. Someone reported her missing to the police. The police went to her apartment. They looked around. They found small drops of blood in her apartment. The drops were on the floor and on some surfaces. They also found small drops of blood outside the apartment. This was a sign that something bad had happened. The police started asking people in the building questions. They asked John Hardy Rose questions because he lived right above Patricia. John talked to the police. He told them things, but he did not tell them where the body was. He said something strange. He said that the disposition of Patricia Stewart was so bad that the police would not be able to find any remains of her. This made the police more suspicious. The police came back to talk to John more than once. At first, John said he did not want to talk about Patricia's disappearance. He said the situation was too bad to talk about. He said he was worried about what his family would think of him. But he kept talking to the police bit by bit. At this point, the police had not arrested John. They had not found the body. They had not charged him with any crime. They were still gathering information. On January 13th, 1991, the police had enough reason to search 2 cars. They asked John's sister for permission to search her yellow Ford. She said yes. They also asked John for permission to search his blue Pontiac. He said yes. The State Bureau of Investigation sent agents to do the search. Inside the 2 cars, the agents found several items. They found a pair of nunchucks, which are wooden sticks connected by a chain used for fighting. They found a tire tool. They found jumper cables. They found a black sleeveless jacket. They found a thermos, which is a bottle that keeps drinks hot or cold. Every single one of these items had blood on it. The agents sent the blood to a lab for testing. The tests showed that the blood on the thermos and the blood inside the trunk of the yellow Ford matched Patricia Stewart's blood type. The tests also showed that the blood did not match John's blood type. This meant the blood almost certainly came from Patricia. On January 14th, 1991, the agents met with John again. They told him what the tests found. They asked him to explain. John did not confess. He said he still did not want to talk about Patricia's disappearance. On January 15th, 1991, the agents came back to speak with John. This time, John's mother was there with him. The agents asked questions. John's mother spoke to her son. She told him that he needed to tell the truth. She told him that he needed to say whatever he knew about where Patricia was. John listened to his mother. Then John told the agents where Patricia's body was located. He said it was at his grandmother's farm. At that same moment, other police officers were already searching the farm. They had started searching based on other clues. When the agents heard John say the farm, they radioed the officers on the scene. The officers radioed back that they had already found the body. They had uncovered it from the shallow grave. The police arrested John Hardy Rose right then. He was taken into custody. The agents read him his rights. He chose to give up those rights and speak freely. He then gave a full confession. He told them everything he did on the night of January 2nd and the morning of January 3rd. He explained how he stabbed, beat, and choked Patricia. He explained how he wrapped her body, moved it from his car to his sister's car, drove to the farm, dug the grave, poured gasoline, set the body on fire, and covered it with rocks and branches. The case went to trial in Haywood County, North Carolina. The trial started and ended with a verdict. On May 12, 1992, the jury found John Hardy Rose guilty of first-degree murder. The same jury then decided his punishment. They sentenced him to death. John's lawyers tried to appeal the sentence. They argued that his trial lawyers were not good enough. One lawyer had just finished law school. The other lawyer had been retired for years after working as a prosecutor. Neither lawyer found out that a doctor had diagnosed John with severe mental illness when he was in prison in Mississippi. The appeals went through different courts. A federal district judge agreed with John on one claim about a promise that he would avoid the death penalty if he confessed. But the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals overturned that decision. All of John's appeals were finally exhausted in September 2001. John then told his lawyer not to ask the governor for clemency. However, the case received attention from the Vatican. Pope John Paul II sent a letter to Governor Mike Easley of North Carolina. The Pope asked the governor to spare John's life. Governor Easley was a Catholic. He held a clemency hearing on November 27, 2001. Patricia Stewart's family attended the hearing. They said the death penalty was a just punishment for what John did. They also said they felt compassion for John's family. Governor Easley found no convincing reason to change the sentence. He refused to grant clemency. On November 30, 2001, at 2 a.m., John Hardy Rose was taken to the death chamber at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. He was given a lethal injection. The injection killed him. He was pronounced dead at 2:18 a.m. His mother and 2 sisters watched. Patricia Stewart's mother, two aunts and sister also watched. John Hardy Rose was 43 years old. He was the fifth person executed in North Carolina that year and the 21st since the state brought back the death penalty in 1984. Patricia Stewart's family continued their lives without her, remembering the young woman who wanted to prove she could live on her own after her divorce. John Hardy Rose's body was taken from the prison, and the story of what he did to Patricia Stewart came to a final end. Story 2. Lois Nadine Dodd was born on September 12, 1940. She was born in the state of Oklahoma. Her family lived in a small community. Her father worked as a plumber and an electrician. He was also a preacher at a church. Her mother was a housewife who took care of the home and the children. Lois had two brothers. She grew up with them in the same household. The family went to church regularly. Lois attended Sunday school as a child. She was also active in church activities during her early teenage years. She learned to play the piano. She would play the piano to go along with the church choir. Lois went to public school. After finishing public school, she attended business college. She learned skills that would help her get office jobs. As a young woman, she was described by people who knew her as having a strong personality. In high school, other students gave her a nickname. They called her Mean Nadine. This nickname suggested that she could be tough or unfriendly at times. But during her early adult years, she continued to go to church. She remained involved in religious activities. At some point as a young adult, Lois got married. Her husband's name was Jim Smith. People also called him by the nickname Hork. Lois and Jim Smith had several children together. One of their sons was named Greg. Another son was named James. They also had daughters. Lois was the main person who raised the children. She took care of them most of the time. The marriage between Lois and Jim Smith was not a happy one. Jim Smith drank alcohol heavily. When he drank, he became mean and violent. He physically hurt Lois on multiple occasions. He beat her. At least 2 times, he broke her leg. The abuse went on for many years. Lois stayed in the marriage for a long time. She tried to protect her children from their father's behavior. She made sure the children went to church. She was responsible for getting them involved in religious activities. One incident happened in 1965. Lois and Jim Smith were drinking alcohol. They started arguing. During the argument, Lois shot Jim with a small gun. The gun was a .25 caliber pistol. Jim later said that the gun went off during a struggle. He said Lois did not mean to shoot him. The wound was not deadly. Jim survived. No major legal charges came from this incident at that time. In 1966, Lois was in a serious car accident. The crash was bad. She lost consciousness. She was knocked out for a period of time. The accident caused damage to her brain. Doctors did not fully understand the damage at the time, but years later, experts would find that the accident had changed how her brain worked. The injury made it harder for her to control strong feelings or sudden violent actions, especially if she had been drinking alcohol or taking certain drugs. Eventually, Lois and Jim Smith separated. They got a divorce. Lois continued to raise the children on her own. She worked at different jobs. She was able to hold steady employment for most of her adult life. She worked hard to provide for her children. Her children saw her as a good and loving mother. They said she did everything she could for them. During the years after her divorce, Lois met a new man. They became engaged to be married. She spent time with her fiancé and his family. She continued to see her children, including her son Greg. Greg was a young man by this time. He had relationships with different girlfriends. One of his girlfriends was a woman named Cindy Bailey. Cindy was 21 years old in 1982. Lois knew that Greg and Cindy had broken up at some point, but Lois was not deeply involved in Greg's romantic life. Lois had habits that were not always healthy. Sometimes she drank beer or other alcohol. Sometimes she took pills that were not prescribed to her. She did not see these habits as a serious problem. She was able to go to work and take care of her daily responsibilities. People who knew her did not think she was an alcoholic or a drug addict. But she did use alcohol and pills on occasion. By the summer of 1982, Lois was 41 years old. She was living in Oklahoma. She had a fiancé. She had children who were grown or nearly grown. Her son Greg was an adult. He was involved in some activities that Lois did not fully understand. There were rumors that Greg was involved with illegal drugs. There were also rumors that someone wanted to hurt Greg. Lois heard these rumors. She became worried about her son. She did not want anything bad to happen to him. Lois continued to live her daily life. She went to work. She spent time with her fiancé. She kept in touch with her children. She did not know that very soon she would be part of an event that would change everything. She did not know that her worries about Greg would lead her down a dark path. She was simply a mother who loved her son and wanted to keep him safe. Lois Smith's worry for her son Greg grew stronger in the days before July 4th, 1982. She had heard rumors that Cindy Bailey, Greg's former girlfriend, had made threats. The rumors said that Cindy wanted to have Greg killed. Lois believed these rumors. She did not ask the police for help. She decided to handle the situation herself. On the night of July 3rd, 1982, Lois was with her fiancé. They spent the night at her fiancé's sister's house. Lois did not sleep. She stayed awake the whole night. She also drank beer. By the early morning hours of July 4th, she had been awake for about 24 hours. She had also taken some pills. These pills were not prescribed to her. The combination of no sleep, alcohol, and pills affected her judgment. Also during that night, Lois spoke with her son Greg. They talked about Cindy Bailey. Greg told his mother that Cindy was a problem. He said that Cindy had threatened him. Lois and Greg decided to do something about Cindy. They made a plan. They would pick Cindy up from a motel in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Then they would confront her about the threats. Lois and Greg were joined by a woman named Teresa Baker. Teresa was also known by the last name DeMoss. She was a friend or associate of Greg's. Some reports say she was jealous of Cindy because Cindy had been Greg's girlfriend. Teresa agreed to come along. The three of them drove together in a car. They arrived at a motel in Tahlequah early on the morning of July 4th, 1982. Cindy Bailey was staying at that motel. She was 21 years old. She did not know that Lois and Greg were coming to see her. She thought they were just giving her a ride or talking with her. Cindy got into the car with them. She did not know what was about to happen. The car drove away from the motel. Once they were on the road, Lois turned to Cindy. Lois confronted her directly. Lois asked Cindy about the rumors. She asked if Cindy had arranged for someone to kill Greg. Cindy denied the rumors. She said she had not made any threats. She said she had not arranged any killing. But Lois did not believe her. Lois became angry. She reached for a knife. The knife came from Cindy's own purse. Lois took the knife and stabbed Cindy in the throat. She did not just stab once. She twisted the knife while it was in Cindy's throat. Cindy was hurt badly. She could not fight back. The knife wound was deep. It was potentially fatal on its own. While Lois was attacking Cindy, Greg was in the car as well. He had a pistol with him. At some point during the drive, Greg pulled out the gun. He pointed it at Cindy. He told her not to lie to his mother. He also said that if she hurt his mother, he would shoot her and not think twice about it. Greg also took a knife out of Cindy's purse. He told his mother that Cindy was going to use that knife to hurt her. This made Lois even more angry. The car drove to a house in Gans, Oklahoma. The house belonged to Jim Smith. Jim was Lois's ex-husband and Greg's father. Jim was at the house with his new wife, Robin. Lois, Greg, Teresa, and Cindy all went inside the house. Robin left shortly after they arrived. She did not want to be part of what was happening. Once inside the house, Lois took control. She forced Cindy to sit in a recliner chair. Cindy was already bleeding from the stab wound in her throat. She was scared. She begged for her life. But Lois did not stop. Lois threatened to kill Cindy. She taunted Cindy with the pistol. She pointed the gun at Cindy's head and then at her stomach. She moved the gun back and forth. She wanted Cindy to be afraid. Lois fired the first shot. She shot into the recliner near Cindy's head. The bullet did not hit Cindy. It was meant to scare her. Then Lois fired more shots. She shot Cindy multiple times. Cindy fell from the chair onto the floor. She was wounded but still alive. While Cindy was on the floor, Greg took the pistol. He reloaded it with new bullets. While Greg was reloading, Lois did something cruel. She laughed. Then she jumped on Cindy's neck. She bounced up and down on Cindy's throat. This caused more pain and injury. Cindy could not defend herself. After Greg finished reloading, he handed the pistol back to his mother. Lois took the gun. She fired 4 more bullets into Cindy's chest. Then she fired 2 more bullets into the back of Cindy's head. Cindy died from these wounds. Later, an autopsy was performed on Cindy's body. The doctor found 9 gunshot wounds in total. 5 of those gunshot wounds were in the chest. 2 were in the head. 1 was in the back. 5 of the gunshot wounds were fatal by themselves. The stab wound in the throat was also potentially fatal. Cindy had been shot, stabbed, choked, and stomped on. She suffered a great deal before she died. After the killing, Lois and Greg tried to hide what they had done. Lois told the others to get rid of evidence. They discussed putting Cindy's body in the trunk of Greg's car. They also cleaned up blood at the murder scene. Greg wiped the gun with a towel to remove fingerprints. Lois also wrote a note to Greg. In the note, she told him what to say to the police. She told him to blame Teresa Baker for the shooting. She told him to say that Teresa was jealous of Cindy and that Teresa had fired the gun. Lois told Greg to read the note over and over until he learned what to say. She also told him to flush the note down the toilet when he was done. Lois also had a plan to create an alibi. She would tell people that she was not the shooter. She would say that Teresa Baker was the one who killed Cindy. She hoped this lie would protect her and her son. On the same day of the murder, July 4th, 1982, Lois made a phone call. She called an attorney named Monty Strout. She told him what had happened. She admitted that she had stabbed Cindy and shot at her, but she said she did not mean to kill her. The attorney agreed to represent her. He also later agreed to represent Greg. At the time of the crime, there were other people who noticed something was wrong. Robin Smith, Jim's wife, had been at the house. She left because she felt scared. She saw that Lois was angry and out of control. She heard Lois tell Cindy that Cindy was going to die. Jim Smith was also at the house. He saw Lois with the gun. He heard the shots. He did not try to stop Lois because he was afraid. Lois had pointed the gun in his direction at one point and told him to go back into the bathroom. He obeyed because he thought she might shoot him too. Teresa Baker was present for the whole crime. She saw Lois choke Cindy in the car. She saw Lois stab Cindy. She saw Lois shoot Cindy multiple times. She saw Lois jump on Cindy's neck. Teresa later told other people what had happened. She did not call the police right away, but she was a witness to everything. Neighbors also noticed something unusual. At one point during the morning, 2 men drove up to Jim Smith's house. Greg went to the front door. He told the men that Jim was not home. This was a lie. Greg wanted to send the men away so they would not see what was happening inside. The men left without asking more questions. By the end of July 4th, 1982, Cindy Bailey was dead. Her body was found at Jim Smith's house. The police were called. They began to ask questions. They saw the blood. They found the bullet casings. They found the knife. They took photographs of the body and the crime scene. They collected Cindy's bloodstained dress and her sandals as evidence. Lois Smith was questioned by the police. She gave her version of events. She said that Teresa Baker was the one who shot Cindy. She said Teresa was jealous of Cindy because of Greg. She denied that she was the shooter. But the police noticed that Lois had blood spatters on her blouse. They also noticed that her story did not match what other witnesses said. At this point, the police had not yet made an arrest. They were still gathering information. They had suspects: Lois Smith, Greg Smith, and Teresa Baker. They had witnesses: Jim Smith and Robin Smith. They had physical evidence: the gun, the knife, the blood-stained clothing, and the photographs. But the full investigation had not yet begun. The police did not yet know exactly how the crime would be solved. They only knew that a young woman had been killed in a very brutal way. The police in Sequoia County, Oklahoma, began their investigation on July 4th, 1982, right after Cindy Bailey's body was found. The first officers who arrived at Jim Smith's house in Gans saw the scene clearly. Cindy's body was on the floor. There was blood on the furniture and the floor. Bullet holes were visible in the walls and the recliner chair. The officers secured the house. They did not allow anyone to enter or leave until they had finished their initial examination. The police collected physical evidence from the house. They found a pistol. They found a knife. They found bullet casings on the floor. They took photographs of the body from multiple angles. They also took Cindy's blood-stained dress and her sandals as evidence. These items were logged and stored for later use in court. The police then interviewed everyone who had been at the house that morning. They spoke with Jim Smith. They spoke with Robin Smith. They spoke with Teresa Baker. They also spoke with Lois Smith and Greg Smith. Each person gave a statement. The officers compared the statements to find inconsistencies. Teresa Baker told the police that Lois Smith was the one who choked, stabbed, and shot Cindy. She described the events in detail. She said Lois put on black gloves before choking Cindy in the car. She said Lois twisted the knife in Cindy's throat. She said Lois fired multiple shots at Cindy while Cindy begged for her life. She also said that Greg reloaded the gun and that Lois jumped on Cindy's neck while laughing. Teresa's statement matched much of what Jim and Robin Smith had seen. Lois Smith gave a different story. She told the police that Teresa Baker was the real killer. She said Teresa was jealous of Cindy because Cindy had been Greg's girlfriend. Lois said Teresa fired the shots. She admitted that she had stabbed Cindy and that she had fired a shot into the recliner near Cindy's head. But she insisted that she did not mean to kill Cindy and that Teresa had done the fatal shooting. The police noticed that Lois's blouse had small blood spatters on the front. They collected the blouse as evidence. They also found a note that Lois had written to Greg. The note told Greg what to say to the police. It instructed him to blame Teresa and to say that Teresa had committed the murder. The note also told Greg to flush it down the toilet. Greg did not destroy the note in time. The police found it. The police arrested Lois Smith within days of the murder. They also arrested Greg Smith. Both were charged with first-degree murder. Teresa Baker was not charged. The prosecution believed that Teresa was a witness, not a participant who could be proven to have helped plan the crime. The prosecution also believed that Teresa's testimony would be valuable in convicting Lois and Greg. Lois Smith's trial took place in December 1982 in Sequoia County. The trial was held in the district court. The judge was Bill Ed Rogers. The prosecutor was Michael Daffin, an assistant district attorney. Lois was represented by her attorney Monty Strout. The trial was divided into two parts. The first part was to decide if Lois was guilty. The second part was to decide her punishment if she was found guilty. During the first part of the trial, the prosecution presented its evidence. They called witnesses including Teresa Baker, Jim Smith, and Robin Smith. Each witness described what they had seen on the morning of July 4th, 1982. Teresa Baker testified that Lois shot Cindy multiple times. Jim Smith testified that Lois was in control of the situation and had a gun. Robin Smith testified that Lois said Cindy was going to die. The prosecution also called a chemist from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. His name was Kenneth Eade. He testified about the blood spatters on Lois's blouse. He said that the pattern of the blood showed that the person wearing the blouse was standing next to Cindy when the shots were fired. He concluded that Lois was the shooter. This evidence was later questioned, but at the time of the trial, the judge allowed it to be presented to the jury. The prosecution also showed the jury the knife, the pistol, the blood-stained clothing, and the photographs of Cindy's body. The doctor who performed the autopsy testified that Cindy had 9 gunshot wounds. He said 5 of those wounds were fatal. He also said the stab wound in the throat was potentially fatal. Lois Smith testified in her own defense. She told the jury that Teresa Baker was the shooter. She admitted that she had stabbed Cindy. She admitted that she had fired a shot into the recliner. But she said she did not kill Cindy. She said she was trying to protect her son Greg. She also denied being under the influence of alcohol or drugs at the time of the murder. This denial surprised her own attorney. He had expected her to use intoxication as a defense. The jury listened to all the evidence. They also heard the closing arguments from both sides. Then they went to deliberate. After discussing the case, the jury returned with a verdict. They found Lois Nadine Smith guilty of murder in the first degree. The trial then moved to the second part. The jury had to decide whether Lois would receive the death penalty or life in prison. The prosecution argued that there were aggravating factors. These were reasons why the death penalty was appropriate. The prosecution said the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. They also said that Lois created a great risk of death to more than one person. They pointed out that Lois had pointed the gun at Jim Smith and threatened others in the house. Lois's defense team presented mitigating factors. These were reasons why the death penalty should not be given. They told the jury that Lois was a good mother. She had raised her children mostly alone. She had been physically abused by her ex-husband. She had held steady jobs throughout her life. She had been a model prisoner since her arrest. They also noted that she had attended church and played the piano for the choir. The jury considered both the aggravating factors and the mitigating factors. They found that both aggravating factors existed. They decided that the death penalty was the appropriate punishment. On December 29, 1982, the judge formally sentenced Lois Nadine Smith to death. Greg Smith was tried separately 6 months later. His trial took place in June 1983 in Muskogee County. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. He did not receive the death penalty. The prosecution believed that Lois was the main actor and that Greg played a supporting role by reloading the gun and helping clean up. That difference in roles led to the different sentences. Lois Smith appealed her conviction and death sentence. Her case went to the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. She argued that there had been errors in her trial. She said that her attorney should not have represented both her and Greg because that created a conflict of interest. She said the jury had been selected improperly. She said the photographs of Cindy's body were too prejudicial. She also said the prosecutor made improper comments during closing arguments. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals reviewed her case in 1986. The court rejected each of her arguments. The judges said there was no actual conflict of interest because Lois had insisted on keeping the same lawyer. They said the photographs were not overly gruesome and helped show the nature of the wounds. They said the evidence against Lois was overwhelming. They affirmed her conviction and death sentence. Lois then filed a petition for post-conviction relief in state court. She raised new claims. She said that Kenneth Eade, the blood spatter expert, was not qualified to give the testimony he had given. She presented new affidavits showing that Eade had overstated his training. She also said that her trial attorney had failed to investigate properly and that her appellate attorney had been ineffective. The State District Court held an evidentiary hearing in 1992. The court denied her petition. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed that denial in 1996. Lois then took her case to federal court. She filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. She asked the federal court to overturn her conviction or her death sentence. The federal district court reviewed her claims. The court held another evidentiary hearing on the conflict of interest issue. The court found that Lois had been properly advised about the potential conflict and had knowingly chosen to keep her attorney. The district court denied her petition. Lois appealed to the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. That court reviewed her case in 2000. The 10th Circuit examined all of her claims carefully. The court agreed that Eads' qualifications were overstated. But the court said this was harmless error because there was so much other evidence against Lois. The court also found no actual conflict of interest and no ineffective assistance of counsel. The 10th Circuit affirmed the denial of habeas relief. Lois then asked the United States Supreme Court to hear her case. The Supreme Court reviewed her final appeals. On the first day of its term in October 2001, the Supreme Court rejected her request. There were no more appeals left. After the Supreme Court's decision, the Oklahoma Attorney General asked the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals to set an execution date. The court set the date for December 4, 2001. Lois was 61 years old at that time. In early November 2001, Lois asked the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board to grant her clemency. Clemency would have changed her death sentence to life in prison. Her attorneys argued that she had suffered a head injury in a car accident. They said she was trying to protect her son. They said she was under the influence of alcohol and drugs at the time of the murder. The Assistant Attorney General argued against clemency. The board listened to both sides. Then the board denied clemency. On the night of December 4, 2001, Lois Nadine Smith was moved from the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in Oklahoma City to the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. The execution was scheduled for 9 p.m. Central Time. Lois was allowed to make a final statement. She thanked her attorneys. Then she spoke to the family of Cindy Bailey. She said, "To the families, I want to say I'm sorry for the pain and loss I've caused you. I ask that you forgive me. You must forgive to be forgiven." At 9:13 p.m., the lethal injection was administered. The drugs caused her heart to stop. She was pronounced dead. She became the 8th woman executed in the United States since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. She was the 3rd woman executed in Oklahoma in 2001. She was the last woman on Oklahoma's death row at that time. Cindy Bailey's daughter, Brandy Fields, watched the execution. She was 24 years old. She had been a young child when her mother was killed. After the execution, she said she was glad it was over. It had been a very long time. Lois Nadine Smith was buried at Tahlequah City Cemetery in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Greg Smith continued to serve his life sentence. Cindy Bailey's family tried to move forward with their lives, but the loss of their daughter and mother never fully left them. The story of Lois Nadine Smith ends with her death by lethal injection on December 4, 2001, while Cindy Bailey's family carried the memory of her brutal murder for the rest of their lives. Story 3. Sahib Latif al-Mozawi was born on June 1, 1948, in Iraq. He was born into a family that belonged to a religious minority group. This meant that many people in the government did not like his religion. From a young age, his life was hard because of this. When Sahib was still young, his father died. This was a very difficult time for the family. After his father passed away, Sahib became the oldest man in the family. He had to take care of his mother, and his 5 younger brothers and sisters. He had to find food and money for them. He worked very hard just to keep them alive. Because his family belonged to a religious minority, they were often treated badly by the Iraqi government. The government did not protect them. Instead, government officials sometimes hurt them or took things from them. Sahib lived in fear for many years. One of the worst things that happened to Sahib was when his own son was taken. The Iraqi government kidnapped his son. After the kidnapping, Sahib never saw his son again. He believed that his son was murdered by the government. This event broke his heart. It also made him decide that he had to leave Iraq to save the rest of his family. Sahib and his remaining family members fled from Iraq. They went to a refugee camp in Saudi Arabia. A refugee camp is a place where people who have lost their homes can stay. The camp was crowded. Food was limited. Life there was not easy, but it was safer than staying in Iraq. In the refugee camp, Sahib met another Iraqi family. That family included a man named Muhammad al-Nashi, his niece Inam al-Nashi, and another niece named Fatima al-Nashi. Sahib spent time with this family in the camp. They stayed in the camp for nearly 1 year. During that time, 2 marriages were arranged. Arranged marriages are when families decide who will marry whom, instead of the couple choosing on their own. Muhammad al-Nashi married Sahib's daughter Sahar, and Sahib al-Mozawi married Inam al-Nashi. These marriages happened in the refugee camp. In July 1992, both families were given permission to leave the refugee camp. They were allowed to go to the United States. A sponsor family helped them come to America. The sponsor family was a husband and wife named Dr. Fakhruddin al-Bahadali and Zainab Atiya. They lived in Edmond, Oklahoma, which is near Oklahoma City. Sahib al-Mozawi, his new wife Inam, his daughters, his son, and the rest of the group all moved to Oklahoma City. They arrived in July 1992. Sahib was 44 years old at that time. He had left behind a life of war, persecution, and loss. He was now in a new country. He did not speak much English. He did not know many people. He had to start over completely. After the families arrived in Oklahoma City in July 1992, Sahib al-Mozawi and his wife Inam al-Nashi lived together as husband and wife. But very quickly, problems started between them. They argued often. The arguments were about many small things, but they grew worse over time. Inam became pregnant. While she was pregnant, the arguments did not stop. In fact, they became more serious. Inam felt unsafe with Sahib, so she made a decision. She moved out of the apartment she shared with Sahib. She went to live with her uncle, Muhammad al-Nashi. Muhammad had his own apartment in the same group of apartments. Inam's sister Fatima also lived there or stayed there often. On October 11, 1992, Inam gave birth to a baby boy at a hospital in Oklahoma City. The baby was born healthy. After the birth, someone from the refugee resettlement program, a woman named Josephine Warden, told Sahib that his son had been born. Sahib went to the hospital to see the baby. At the hospital, a dispute started. Sahib and Inam had talked earlier about what to name the baby. They had agreed to name the boy after Sahib's father. But when the baby was born, Inam chose a different name. She did not use the name of Sahib's father. Sahib became very angry about this. The next day, a nurse at the hospital called Ms. Warden. The nurse said there was a problem. When Ms. Warden arrived, she saw Sahib, Dr. al-Bahadali, the sponsor, and a police officer named Karen Mall. Inam was in fear. Officer Mall tried to solve the problem. She had the hospital type up a fake birth certificate form with the name that Sahib wanted. Sahib wrote the name down. Then Officer Mall drove Sahib home. This calmed him down for the moment, but he was still angry. Fatima, Inam's sister, later testified that Sahib had threatened to kill Inam and her family. These were not empty words. Inam took the threats seriously. With help from Ms. Warden and a translator named Farouk Nekati, Inam went to court. On November 12, 1992, she got a temporary victim protection order. This is a paper from a judge that tells a person to stay away and not cause harm. On November 20th, 1992, the judge made the order permanent. Sahib was present in court that day. He knew he was supposed to stay away from Inam. But on November 21st, 1992, Ms. Warden was called to Muhammad's apartment. When she arrived, she was shocked to see Sahib there. He was sitting in the living room with Inam, Dr. al-Bahadali, and others. The protection order said Sahib should not be near Inam. Ms. Warden looked at Inam and told her she should not be there because of the order. Inam left the room. Dr. al-Bahadali became angry at Ms. Warden. He said he was trying to get the family back together and that she had ruined everything. He left with Sahib and Inam. Then came November 28th, 1992. That evening, Ms. Warden visited Muhammad's apartment. She brought her daughter, who was home from college for Thanksgiving. Ms. Warden and her daughter stayed for about half an hour. While they were there, Inam asked Ms. Warden to come to the bedroom. Sahib was not there at that time. Later, Ms. Warden left the apartment. About 15 minutes after Ms. Warden left, Fatima went to Ms. Warden's apartment. Fatima said she had changed her mind about going to a dinner party that evening. She needed to change her clothes. Ms. Warden told her to come back by 6:45 p.m. At 6:38 p.m., Ms. Warden's daughter said it was getting late. Then at exactly 6:38, there was a knock on the door. Ms. Warden opened the door. Fatima was standing there. She was in shock. She was bleeding from her stomach. Fatima said 3 words. Inam Muhammad al-Mozawi. She pointed to her stomach. Ms. Warden understood that Sahib had stabbed Fatima, Muhammad, and Inam. Here is what happened inside the apartment before Fatima ran out. Inam asked Sahib if she could go to the dinner party with friends. Sahib said no. He became angry. He left the apartment and went to his own apartment to get clothes for Inam and the baby. He planned to end the relationship. When he came back, he was upset. He called Inam and Fatima bad names. He called them street girls and bitches. Muhammad told Sahib to leave. Instead of leaving, Sahib pulled a knife from his jacket. He stabbed Muhammad in the chest. Inam tried to help her uncle. Sahib grabbed Inam and stabbed her in the stomach. Muhammad yelled for Fatima to help Inam. Fatima tried to take the knife from Sahib's hand. While she was trying, Sahib stabbed her 3 times, once in the stomach, once in her hand, and once in her left side. Fatima managed to escape and run to Ms. Warden's apartment. After stabbing Fatima, Sahib chased Inam outside. A witness named Mike Walker was in a neighbor's garage. He heard a woman screaming for help. He looked over a fence and saw 3 people running up an alley, a woman with 2 men, one on each side of her. He went around the fence and saw the man on the woman's left hitting her on the head and shoulder. After the last hit, the woman fell to the ground. The 2 men ran away. Another witness, Selena Walker, looked out her bedroom window. She saw a man with his left arm around a woman's neck. The woman was struggling and screaming. Selena saw something shiny in the man's right hand. She saw him make a slicing motion near the woman's neck area. She turned away. When she looked back, the woman was on the ground with blood coming from her. The man walked away. Cheryl Walker, Selena's mother, went to Inam and tried to help her. She saw Sahib walk back to Inam twice. He looked at her. Then he walked away again. Cheryl saw that Sahib had something that looked like a knife wrapped in his jacket. Inam al-Nashi, age 26, died from her stab wounds. Muhammad al-Nashi, age 45, died from his stab wound. Fatima al-Nashi survived. She was taken to a hospital and treated for her 3 stab wounds. Sahib al-Mozawi went back to his own apartment. He was later arrested there. After Fatima al-Nashi arrived bleeding at Ms. Warden's apartment, Ms. Warden called the police. Officers from the Oklahoma City Police Department were sent to the apartment complex. When they arrived, they found Inam al-Nashi's body on the ground outside. She had been stabbed multiple times. They also found Muhammad al-Nashi's body inside the apartment. He had been stabbed once in the chest. Paramedics came, but both victims were already dead. The police spoke to the witnesses. Mike Walker told the police what he had seen. He described the man who was hitting the woman. He told the police that the man had walked away toward a certain direction. Mike Walker had followed Sahib for a short time before returning to help Inam. He pointed the police toward where Sahib had gone. Selena Walker and Cheryl Walker also gave statements. Selena described the shiny object in the man's right hand. Cheryl described the man's clothing: dark brown slacks, a dark brown jacket, and a white shirt. She also said the man had something wrapped in his jacket that looked like a knife. The police went to Sahib al-Mozawi's apartment. He was there. They arrested him without a fight. He was taken to the police station for questioning. At that time, the police also collected evidence from the crime scene. They found a knife. They found blood on the floors and walls of Muhammad's apartment. They also found blood on Sahib's clothing. Sahib was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault and battery with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. The assault charge was for attacking Fatima. Fatima survived and was able to tell the police exactly what happened. Her testimony became a key part of the case. The case went to trial in 1994. The trial was held in Oklahoma County District Court. Judge Richard Freeman oversaw the trial. The prosecution called many witnesses. Josephine Warden testified about the events leading up to the night of the murders. Officer Karen Mall testified about the hospital dispute over the baby's name. The 3 witnesses from the apartment complex, Mike Walker, Selena Walker, and Cheryl Walker, testified about what they saw outside. Fatima al-Nashi testified inside the courtroom. She described how Sahib stabbed her sister, and her uncle. She told the jury that Sahib pulled a knife from his jacket and attacked without warning. Sahib chose to testify in his own defense. He gave a different version of events. He claimed that Muhammad and Fatima had confronted him with knives first. He said that Muhammad tried to stab him, and that Inam stepped between them and was stabbed by Muhammad by accident. He said he never stabbed Fatima because she was behind him. He claimed he only picked up Inam to carry her, then put her down when she told him to run. He denied wrapping his jacket around a knife. He admitted he was wearing a white shirt and jacket, but said he was wearing jeans, not dark slacks. The jury did not believe Sahib's story. The physical evidence did not match his claims. The witnesses all described a man attacking with a knife, not a man trying to help. The fact that Fatima was stabbed 3 times while trying to take the knife showed that Sahib was the aggressor. The jury found Sahib al-Mozawi guilty on all 3 counts. During the sentencing phase, the jury had to decide whether Sahib should receive life in prison or the death penalty. The prosecution argued that 3 aggravating circumstances existed. First, Sahib knowingly created a great risk of death to more than one person. Second, he was a continuing threat to society. Third, the murders were especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. The jury agreed with all 3 aggravating factors. They recommended the death penalty for each of the 2 murder counts. For the assault on Fatima, they recommended 20 years in prison. Judge Freeman followed the jury's recommendation. On April 15, 1994, Sahib al-Mozawi was formally sentenced to death. After the sentence, Sahib appealed his case. An appeal is a request for a higher court to review the case for mistakes. His first appeal went to the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. That court affirmed his conviction and sentence in 1996. He filed another appeal called a post-conviction relief application. The same court denied it in 1998. He then took his case to the federal courts. He filed a habeas corpus petition, which is a request for a federal judge to review whether his imprisonment was legal. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals denied his request in 2000. All of his appeals failed. Sahib did not request a clemency hearing. Clemency is when the governor or a board agrees to reduce a sentence or stop an execution. He chose not to ask for mercy. He had no appeals pending by the end of 2001. On December 6, 2001, Sahib Latif Al-Mazawi was executed at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma. He was 53 years old. The method used was lethal injection. He was pronounced dead. He became the 18th prisoner executed in Oklahoma that year and the 747th prisoner executed in the United States since 1976. After the execution, Inam's family continued to mourn her loss. Fatima al-Nashi survived her wounds and went on with her life, but she carried the memory of that night. Muhammad al-Nashi's daughter, who was married to Sahib's daughter, was left without her father. The two families who had once shared a refugee camp and a journey to America were broken apart forever by the actions of one man. The case of Sahib Latif Al-Mazawi ended on December 6, 2001, when he was put to death for stabbing his wife and her uncle to death 9 years earlier. Story 4. Byron Ashley Parker was born in August 1960. He was a white male. He grew up in the southeastern United States, mostly in Georgia and Florida. His family included his mother and 2 older sisters. His father was not mentioned in the records of his later life. The family did not have much money. Byron lived in mobile home parks and other low-cost housing during his childhood. Byron went to school, but did not finish past the 8th grade. He stopped his formal education when he was around 14 years old. He did not get a high school diploma at that time. Instead, he began to spend time with people who broke the law. He did not hold steady jobs. He did not build a normal social life with friends who followed rules. As a young adult, Byron got into trouble with the police. He was charged with a crime in Florida. That crime involved a young girl. The exact details of that Florida incident were not fully written in public records, but the police in Florida believed Byron had done something wrong with a child. That charge stayed on his record. It did not send him to prison for a long time, but it was a red flag that showed he had a pattern of dangerous behavior around young females. Byron later committed felonies in Georgia. He was convicted of those felonies. A judge sentenced him to probation. Probation means he was allowed to stay out of prison if he followed rules and met with a probation officer. Byron's probation started in Fulton County, Georgia on May 15, 1984. On that same day, his probation was transferred to Douglas County, Georgia. He was told to report to his new probation officer in Douglas County. Byron had a son. The boy was born around 1982. At the time of the events that came later, the boy was 2 years old. Byron kept the boy with him often. He did not have a stable marriage or a long-term partner mentioned in the records. He lived in a trailer park in Douglas County. His neighbors included families with children. One of those families had an 11-year-old girl. Byron continued to use marijuana. He kept small amounts of the drug in his home. He did not tell his probation officer everything about his life. He missed appointments. He did not show up when he was supposed to meet his new probation officer on June 1, 1984. That failure to appear would later become a separate violation. But at this point in his life, before that June, he was simply a man on probation with a young son, a low education, a past arrest in Florida involving a child, and a habit of not following rules. He lived in the trailer park on June 1, 1984, with his 2-year-old son nearby. He had a car. He had no steady job. He had no strong ties to the community. His mother and sisters still spoke to him, but he was mostly alone with his son. On June 1, 1984, an 11-year-old girl named Christian Griffith lived in the same trailer park as Byron Parker. Christy was a white female. She was in the 4th grade at Arbor Station Elementary School. That morning, she had a reason to travel. Her brother was graduating from high school. Christy wanted to go to the graduation ceremony. Her family arranged for a taxi to pick her up and take her to the event. Christy left her trailer and waited for the taxi. She stood outside in the trailer park. She did not see the taxi arriving. At some point, she saw Byron Parker. She knew him as a neighbor. She asked him a simple question. Had he seen the taxi that was supposed to pick her up? That question changed everything. Parker saw an opportunity. Instead of telling her he had not seen the taxi, he offered her a ride. He said he would take her to her brother's graduation. Christy trusted him because he lived nearby. She got into his car. Parker's 2-year-old son was already inside the car. The boy was locked in the vehicle with them. Parker did not drive Christy to the graduation. He drove her away from the trailer park to a different location. He chose a secluded area. The place was wooded and private. No other people were around. He stopped the car. Then he forced Christy to get out of the vehicle. He left his son locked inside the car. The 2-year-old boy stayed alone in the car while Parker took Christy into the woods. Once they were in the secluded area, Parker attacked the girl. He raped her. He used physical force to do this. Christy was 11 years old and could not defend herself. After he finished raping her, Parker decided to kill her. He used a ligature or his hands to strangle her. The strangulation cut off her air. She died from lack of oxygen. The method of murder was strangulation. After Christy died, Parker did not leave her body where it fell. He tied her body to a tree. He used rope or some other binding material. The body was hidden in the wooded area. Parker then walked back to his car. His son was still inside, locked and waiting. Parker got into the car and drove away. He left Christy's body tied to the tree in the woods. Parker returned to his normal life. He went back to the trailer park. Christy's family noticed she was missing. They called the police. Foul play was suspected very quickly because Christy was a young girl who would not run away. The police began asking questions. They went door to door in the trailer park. They asked all the neighbors if they had seen Christy or anything unusual on June 1st. The police questioned Parker on June 5th. They came back and questioned him again on June 6th. Parker gave them statements about where he was on June 1st, but his statements were not entirely consistent. He changed small details each time he spoke. The police noticed this. They also learned about Parker's past charge in Florida involving a young girl. That information made them focus more on Parker as a possible suspect. On June 6th, Parker signed a form that gave the police permission to search his trailer. They searched his home. They did not find any direct evidence of the crime, such as Christy's clothing or blood, but they did find a small amount of marijuana. That was a misdemeanor crime. Parker was on probation, so even a small amount of marijuana was a violation. The police asked Parker on June 6th if he would take a polygraph test, which is a lie detector test. Parker said yes. He agreed to take the test the next day, June 7th. But when June 7th came, Parker did not show up for the appointment. He failed to appear. That same morning, before the polygraph appointment, Parker went to see his probation officer. He had missed his first appointment on June 1st. Now he met the officer on June 5th, and on June 7th he asked for permission to leave the state. The probation officer noted this request. Because Parker failed to appear for the polygraph, and because the police already had the marijuana charge and the probation violation for missing his June 1st appointment, 2 warrants were issued for his arrest on June 7th. One warrant was for possession of less than 1 ounce of marijuana. The second warrant was for violating his probation by failing to appear as directed to the Douglas County Probation Office on June 1st. The police arrested Parker on these 2 warrants. At this point, he was not arrested for murder. He was arrested for the drug charge and the probation violation. After the arrest, Parker was in police custody. He told the officers he would still take a polygraph test if he could speak to his lawyer first. He had called a lawyer before his arrest. Now he called the lawyer again. The lawyer met Parker at the FBI office in Atlanta. The polygraph test was done there. The examiner looked at the results. The examiner could not make a final conclusion after one test. He wanted to run a second test, but the examiner told the sheriff one important fact. Regardless of Parker's answers, Parker knew where Christie's body was. That was the key moment. The police now had a reason to believe Parker was directly involved. They brought Parker back to Douglas County. He talked briefly to two officers. Then Parker asked to speak with his mother and his two sisters. The police allowed this. Parker met with his mother and sisters for about half an hour. After that family meeting, the police again gave Parker his Miranda warnings, which tell a suspect they have the right to remain silent and the right to a lawyer. Parker chose to keep talking. The interrogation continued into the night. At around midnight on June 7th, Parker admitted that he was responsible for Christie's disappearance. He agreed to show the police where her body was. He drew a map by hand. The map showed the secluded wooded area. Police officers took the map and went to the location. They found Christie's body tied to a tree. She had been strangled. The body was exactly where Parker's map said it would be. After the police found the body, they interrogated Parker again. This time, they turned on a tape recorder. Parker gave a recorded confession. After Parker drew the map and the police found Christie and Griffith's body tied to a tree, the investigation moved to a new phase. The police had Parker's tape-recorded confession. They had the body. They had the location where the crime happened. They also had the physical evidence from the autopsy. The medical examiner confirmed that Christie died from strangulation. The examiner also found evidence of rape. Parker was already in police custody on the marijuana charge and the probation violation. After the body was found, the police changed the charges. On July 17, 1984, a grand jury in Douglas County indicted Parker for 3 crimes: malice murder, rape, and kidnapping. A grand jury is a group of citizens who decide if there is enough evidence to bring a person to trial. They decided there was enough evidence against Parker. The trial began on November 5, 1984. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury heard the evidence. The prosecutors presented Parker's confession. They presented the map he drew. They presented the location where the body was found. They presented the medical examiner's report. Parker's lawyers tried to argue that the confession should not be allowed because Parker had asked for a lawyer and the police kept questioning him. But the trial judge allowed the confession into evidence. On November 9, 1984, the jury found Parker guilty of murder and rape. The prosecution chose to drop the kidnapping charge. That meant a judgment of nolle prosequi was entered on the kidnapping count. Parker was convicted of murder and rape. The trial then moved to the penalty phase. The jury had to decide if Parker would receive life in prison or the death penalty. During the penalty phase, the jury found 3 things that made the murder especially serious. These are called aggravating circumstances under Georgia law. One was that the murder happened during a kidnapping with bodily injury. Another was that the murder happened during a rape. The third was a separate legal circumstance under Georgia Code Section B-7. The jury decided that the death penalty was the correct punishment. The judge sentenced Parker to death for the murder. For the rape conviction, the judge gave Parker a life sentence to be served after the death sentence. In Georgia at that time, a life sentence meant a person could be eligible for parole, but the death sentence meant execution. Parker did not accept the verdict. He began filing appeals. An appeal is a request for a higher court to review the case for mistakes. His first direct appeal went to the Georgia Supreme Court in 1985. That court sent the case back to the lower court to hold a new hearing about whether Parker's confessions were allowed. The lower court held that hearing and decided the confessions were still allowed. Parker appealed again. In 1986, the Georgia Supreme Court affirmed the murder conviction and the death sentence. But the court set aside the rape conviction. The reason was that the trial judge had refused to tell the jury about a lesser crime called child molestation. Because the judge made that error, the rape conviction was reversed. That meant Parker was no longer convicted of rape. But the murder conviction and death sentence stayed in place. The Georgia Supreme Court said the death sentence was still valid because of the kidnapping with bodily injury aggravating circumstance. The other two aggravating circumstances were removed. Parker then asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case. That court refused. That happened in 1987. Parker did not stop. He filed a state habeas corpus petition in 1987. Habeas corpus is a legal way for a prisoner to challenge his imprisonment. He filed this in Butts County Superior Court. He added information over time. He also filed a Federal Freedom of Information Act request to get documents from the FBI. The court held hearings in 1990, 1991, and 1992. On May 5, 1995, the court denied Parker's request for relief. Parker then asked the Georgia Supreme Court to allow him to appeal. That court refused on May 24, 1996. He asked the United States Supreme Court again. That court refused on December 16, 1996. Parker then filed a federal habeas corpus petition in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia on November 15, 1996. He raised many issues. One issue was that he had been interrogated by police for 6 days without a lawyer after he had asked for one. The federal court said he could not raise that claim because his lawyers had not raised it properly during the trial or the first appeal. On August 13, 1999, the district court denied relief. Parker was allowed to appeal on 6 issues. He chose to pursue 4 of them before the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. On March 15, 2001, the 11th Circuit affirmed the lower court's decision. Parker asked for a rehearing. That was denied on May 31, 2001. He asked the United States Supreme Court one more time. On November 26, 2001, the Supreme Court refused to hear the case. After all appeals were exhausted, the state moved forward. On November 27, 2001, the Superior Court of Douglas County set an execution order. The order said Parker could be executed during a 7-day window starting at noon on December 11, 2001, and ending at noon on December 18, 2001. The Georgia Department of Corrections scheduled the execution for 7 p.m. on December 11, 2001. Before the execution, Parker had one last chance: the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles. This board has the power to commute a death sentence to life in prison. Parker's lawyers argued that 3 of the 5 board members had conflicts of interest. The chairman and 1 member were being investigated by the same Attorney General's office that was arguing for Parker's execution. A 3rd member was being defended by that same office in a sexual harassment lawsuit. Parker's lawyers said this meant he could not get a fair hearing. A federal judge said the allegations were troubling, but did not stop the hearing. The parole board reviewed the case anyway. They declined to commute Parker's sentence. The governor of Georgia did not intervene. On the day of the execution, December 11, 2001, Parker spent his last hours visiting with about 20 friends and relatives who came to see him. He was emotional. After his family left, he cried. He did not ask for a special last meal. He only had chocolate milk and coffee. He recorded his final words on a tape recorder. In those recorded words, he apologized to the family of Christie and Griffith. He declined to make a spoken statement to the witnesses inside the execution chamber. He was strapped to a gurney. His only words inside the chamber were to ask for a prayer. He then said amen after the chaplain finished. The lethal injection began. The execution team inserted the IVs and administered the drugs. Parker mostly stared at the ceiling during the procedure. He was pronounced dead at 7:26 p.m. on December 11, 2001. Christy and Griffith's mother, Hazel Griffith, waited at home for news that Parker was dead. Afterward, she said she would go to her daughter's grave and tell her that her killer was dead. Parker was the 27th person executed in Georgia since 1976 and the 748th person executed in the United States since that year. Byron Ashley Parker was buried or cremated according to the state's procedures for executed inmates, and Christy and Griffith's family continued to live with the memory of the 11-year-old girl who was taken from them on June 1, 1984. Story 5. Vincent Edward Cooks was born on July 26, 1964. He was born in the United States. He was a black male. His mother was named Annie Daniels. He called his mother Teach as a nickname. He also called her Mom. There is no public information about his father. It is not known if his father lived with him or not. Vincent grew up in Texas. The exact city is not named in the records, but later events took place in Houston and Dallas. So he likely grew up in or around those cities. As a child, he went to school, but he did not do well in school. Later, during his trial, the prosecutor said that Vincent had to be removed from his classes so the rest of the school could function. That was not completely true. In fact, Vincent was placed in a disciplinary setting because he had a problem with truancy. Truancy means he did not go to school when he was supposed to. He skipped classes often. As a young man, Vincent did not have a steady job that is mentioned in the records. Instead, he started to break the law. He got into fights. He also carried guns. His behavior became more aggressive as he got older. In 1984, Vincent was 20 years old. He went to a nightclub one night. At the nightclub, a fight started. A police officer came to the club to stop the fight. Vincent did not stop. Instead, he fired 2 gunshots at that police officer. The officer was not hit, or at least no record says the officer was injured. But firing at a police officer is a very serious crime. This was the first major crime that Vincent committed as an adult. This event would later lead to his first prison sentence. In December 1986, Vincent was sentenced for that crime. He was convicted of aggravated assault. Aggravated assault means attacking someone with a weapon or in a way that causes serious harm. The sentence was 5 years in prison. He began serving that sentence in December 1986. But Vincent did not serve the full 5 years. At that time in Texas, the prisons were very full. There were too many prisoners and not enough space. A federal judge named William Wayne Justice had set a limit on how many prisoners Texas could keep in its prisons. Because of that limit, many prisoners were released early on parole. Parole means being let out of prison early if you follow rules and do not commit more crimes. Vincent served only 8 months of his 5-year sentence. He was released on parole in August 1987. He was 23 years old when he got out of prison. After his release, Vincent did not change his behavior. He started committing more robberies. He used a gun in these robberies. He targeted grocery stores and liquor stores. He watched store owners or employees go to the bank to get cash. Then he waited for them to come back. That was his method. He would steal money by threatening people with his gun. In November 1987, just 3 months after his parole, Vincent robbed a small grocery store in Dallas. The store owner had gone to the bank and come back with $37,000 in cash. Vincent pointed his gun at the owner and demanded the money. He got away with the cash. After the robbery, Vincent left a stolen car near the store. The car was a hot-wired Oldsmobile Cutlass. Hot-wired means he started the car without a key by connecting wires. Police later found Vincent's fingerprint on that car. They also found Tracy Stallworth's palm print. Tracy Stallworth was a friend of Vincent's. In January 1988, Vincent committed another robbery. This time it was a liquor store in Dallas. Again, he waited for employees to return from the bank. Again, he pointed his gun and stole $30,000 in cash. No one was hurt in these two robberies, but Vincent was becoming more confident. Vincent was a very large man. He was 6 feet 3 inches tall. He weighed over 300 pounds at the time of his later arrest. Some records say 318 pounds. Other records say 300 pounds or more. He had a quick temper. He was aggressive. He did not like being told what to do by police officers or other authority figures. He also had friends who committed crimes with him. Two of those friends were Tony Ray Harvey, who was also 23 years old, and Tracy Stallworth, who was 27 years old. They would later be involved in more crimes together. Vincent continued to live in Texas. He did not have a legal job that is mentioned in any record. He made money through robbery. He carried a gun regularly. He did not show any sign that he wanted to stop breaking the law. He had been given parole after only 8 months, but he did not use that second chance to change his life. By February 1988, Vincent had been out of prison for about 6 months. He had already committed 2 armed robberies since his release. He was still friends with Tony Harvey and Tracy Stallworth. The three of them spent time together. They planned more robberies. Vincent did not show fear of the police. He did not show regret for his past crimes. His temper and his willingness to use a gun made him dangerous. On February 26, 1988, Vincent Cooks was 23 years old. He was still on parole. He had already committed 2 armed robberies in November 1987 and January 1988. On this day, he planned another robbery. He did this with his 2 friends, Tony Ray Harvey and Tracy Stallworth. First, the 3 men rented a blue Plymouth. They drove that car to a street near a grocery store. The store was called Brancado's Grocery Store. It was in Dallas, Texas. They parked the blue Plymouth down the street from the store. Then they took a second car. This second car was a stolen Oldsmobile. They parked that stolen car in a parking lot across the street from the store. They placed both cars in position before the robbery. Then all 3 men sat inside the blue Plymouth and waited. They were waiting for something specific. They knew that the owner of the grocery store went to the bank every day to get cash. The store had a check cashing service. That meant the store needed a lot of cash on hand. The owner, Mark DeCardenas, would go to the bank and bring back thousands of dollars. Vincent Cooks and his friends knew this, so they sat and watched the store. Earlier that same day, before the robbery, something happened. Police officers in Dallas noticed the blue Plymouth parked near the grocery store. The officers saw 3 men sitting inside. The officers did not see any crime happening. The men were just sitting in a car. So the officers had no reason to arrest them or detain them. But the officers did one thing. They wrote down the license plate number of the blue Plymouth. Then they left. The 3 men stayed in the car. At 4:30 p.m., Mark DeCardenas went to the bank. He was the owner of the grocery store. He went to get $30,000 in cash. He needed this money for the store's check cashing service. A man went with him. That man was Gary Don McCarthy. Gary McCarthy was 33 years old. He was a white male. He was a Dallas police officer, but he was not in uniform. He was working an off-duty job as a security guard for the grocery store. His job was to protect the store and the people there. He went with DeCardenas to the bank to keep the money safe. DeCardenas and McCarthy got the money from the bank. They left the bank and started walking back to the grocery store. They had the money in a bag. Vincent Cooks and his friends saw them coming. At that moment, Cooks and Harvey got out of the blue Plymouth. They walked across the street and got inside the stolen Oldsmobile. They left Stallworth sitting alone in the blue Plymouth. The Oldsmobile was parked across from the store. So Cooks and Harvey were now in the stolen car waiting. Then Cooks got out of the Oldsmobile. He walked toward DeCardenas and McCarthy on foot. He did not run. He approached them. He was waving a gun. He pointed the gun at them. He demanded the money bag. Then he tried to grab the bag from DeCardenas. Gary McCarthy saw what was happening. McCarthy pushed DeCardenas away from Cooks. McCarthy was trying to protect DeCardenas and the money. When McCarthy pushed, DeCardenas dropped the money bag. The bag fell to the ground. Then Vincent Cooks shot Gary McCarthy. He fired the gun. The bullet hit McCarthy. McCarthy was hurt badly. After shooting McCarthy, Cooks grabbed a bundle of money from the bag. He did not take all 30,000. He took in a bundle thetamounteto 30,000. He took in a bundle thetamounteto 10,000. Then he ran back to the stolen Oldsmobile. He got inside the car. Harvey was already inside. Cooks drove away quickly. Even though McCarthy was shot, he did not fall down right away. He raised his own gun. He fired back at the Oldsmobile as it drove away. McCarthy shot at the car. One of his bullets shattered the rear window of the Oldsmobile. Glass broke everywhere, but the car kept going. Cooks and Harvey fled the scene. McCarthy was taken to a hospital. The name of the hospital was Parkland Memorial Hospital. Doctors tried to save him, but his injury was too severe. He died at the hospital. He left behind a wife and 2 children. He had also been a Baptist missionary before becoming a police officer. He spoke several languages. The money bag with the remaining $20,000 was left on the ground near the grocery store. The robbers did not take it. Now the police had information. 2 police officers had seen the blue Plymouth earlier that day. They had written down the license plate number. They also saw the Oldsmobile with the shattered rear window. When they saw that car, they suspected it was stolen. They chased the Oldsmobile. But when they reached it, the car was already abandoned. Cooks and Harvey had left it somewhere and run away. Inside the car, on the floorboard, police found a revolver. That was the gun used in the shooting. The police traced the license plate from the blue Plymouth. That plate was registered to Tracy Stallworth. They found Stallworth. They arrested him the day after the shooting, on February 27, 1988. When the police questioned Stallworth, he gave them names. He said Vincent Cooks and Tony Harvey were the other 2 men. He told police that Cooks was the one who shot Officer McCarthy. Later, police put together a lineup. A lineup is when a witness looks at several people and tries to pick out the one who did the crime. One witness saw the shooting. That witness later picked Vincent Cooks out of the lineup. The witness said Cooks was the killer. During this time, Vincent Cooks did not admit to the murder. He admitted that he had committed other robberies. He said nobody was hurt in those robberies. But he kept saying he did not shoot Gary McCarthy. He pointed out that early witness descriptions said the shooter was about 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed about 180 pounds. Cooks was 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed more than 300 pounds. He said that proved he was not the shooter. Despite his claim, the police had Stallworth's statement. They had the witness identification. They had the revolver from the stolen car. They had the license plate trail. They arrested Vincent Cooks and Tony Harvey. After Tracy Stallworth was arrested on February 27, 1988, he told police the names of his 2 accomplices, Vincent Cooks and Tony Harvey. Police then went looking for both men. They found Vincent Cooks and arrested him. Cooks was taken to jail. He was held without bond because the crime was capital murder. On March 10, 1988, a grand jury formally indicted Vincent Cooks. The charge was capital murder. The specific charge was murdering a peace officer, Gary McCarthy, during the course of a robbery. In Texas, killing a police officer while committing a robbery is a capital offense. That means the punishment could be death. While Cooks was waiting in jail for his trial, he caused problems. He had a quick temper. One day, he scattered food all over the front wall of his cell. Then he demanded more food loudly. He threatened the jail staff. He said, If anybody messes with me, I'll kill somebody. Then he smiled and said, "This is not the first time I've been accused of it." On other occasions, when guards escorted him from his cell through the officers' dining room, Cooks tried to grab food. When told to stop, he said, "Don't know, expletive police tell me what to do. Any police that mess with me, I'll beat their ass." This behavior was recorded by jail staff and later used in court to show his violent character. The trial began in late 1988. The prosecution presented evidence. They showed that Cook's fingerprint and Stallworth's palm print were found on a stolen car from a previous robbery in November 1987. They showed that Cooks had committed another armed robbery in January 1988. These were presented to show that Cooks had a pattern of robbing stores after bank runs. The prosecution also called the witness who picked Cooks out of the lineup. That witness said Cooks was the shooter. The prosecution also presented the revolver found in the abandoned Oldsmobile. Ballistics tests matched that gun to the bullet that killed Officer McCarthy. The defense argued that Cooks was not the shooter. They pointed out that some early witness descriptions said the killer was shorter and lighter. Cooks was 6 feet 3 inches and over 300 pounds. One witness described a man who was 5 feet 7 inches and 180 pounds. The defense said this proved Cooks was innocent. However, other witnesses identified Cooks. The jury had to decide which evidence to believe. During the trial, Cooks was kept in leg shackles. The prosecution did not intend for the jury to see the shackles, but some jurors may have seen them. Cooks later argued that this was unfair because shackles make a defendant look dangerous. The court allowed the shackles for security reasons because Cooks had a history of violence and had threatened jail staff. On December 7, 1988, the jury found Vincent Cooks guilty of capital murder. The verdict was unanimous. The same jury then heard more evidence to decide between the death penalty and life in prison. The prosecution showed Cooks' past crimes: the 1984 shooting at a police officer, the November 1987 robbery, and the January 1988 robbery. They also showed his behavior in jail. The defense asked for life in prison. The jury decided on the death penalty. Judge formally sentenced Cooks to death. After the sentence, Cooks began appealing. In September 1992, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals confirmed the conviction. They said the trial was fair. On June 28, 1993, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear the case. That meant the conviction and death sentence stood. In April 1995, Cooks filed a state habeas corpus petition. That is a legal request asking the court to review whether his imprisonment was illegal. On April 3, 1996, the Court of Criminal Appeals denied the petition. An execution date was set for May 22, 1996. But on May 16, 1996, Cooks asked a federal district court to stop the execution. The court agreed and issued a stay. This gave Cooks more time to file a federal habeas corpus petition. He filed that petition on April 23, 1997. The federal district court reviewed his claims, including the argument about eyewitness misidentification and the shackles. In December 2000, the district court denied all relief. On July 12, 2001, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals denied Cooks' request to appeal that decision. On August 7, 2001, the trial court set a new execution date, December 12, 2001. As the execution date approached, Cooks spoke to reporters. He said, "I haven't been a saint, but I didn't commit this murder. I did many wrong things, but they're executing me for something I didn't do." He admitted the other robberies, but insisted no one was hurt in those. On December 12, 2001, Vincent Edward Cooks was executed by lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas. He was 37 years old. He had been on death row for 13 years. Before the lethal drugs were given, he made a final statement. He told his mother, I'm sorry, Teach, for not being a better son and not doing better things." Then he looked toward the victim's family. He said, "You people over there, you know what these people are doing. By them executing me, ain't doing nothing right. I don't weigh 180 pounds, 5'7". Then he said to the warden, "Do what you do, warden." The lethal injection was started at 6:17 p.m. He was pronounced dead at 6:28 p.m. Tony Ray Harvey and Tracy Stallworth were not charged with capital murder. They pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery and other crimes. Each received a 20-year prison sentence. The records do not show exactly when they were released. Officer Gary Don McCarthy's family, including his sister Candy McCarthy, attended the execution. Afterward, Candy McCarthy said, "The difficult part of this is reliving the memories. We've been waiting nearly 14 years for this." Mark DeCardenas, the store owner who dropped the money bag, survived the incident and was not physically injured. The case of Vincent Cooks ended with his death by lethal injection on December 12, 2001. Story 6. James Rodney Barker was born on April 18, 1949. His mother was not married. She had mental health problems and could not take care of a baby. So shortly after James was born, she sent him and his older brother Tommy to a place called the Missouri Baptist Children's Home. This was a home for children who had no parents or whose parents could not care for them. James and Tommy did not stay together at first. They were placed in different foster homes. For a while, James was moved from one family to another. Then in 1950, a couple named Ward and Mary Johnson became foster parents for Tommy. The Johnsons lived on a small farm in California, Missouri. That is a town in Monteau County. Tommy went to live with them, but James was still in the children's home or with other families. In April 1951, when James was about 2 years old, he was finally sent to live with the Johnsons as well. The Johnsons found that Tommy was too difficult to manage, so they sent Tommy back to the children's home. But James stayed with the Johnsons. When James was 8 years old, the Johnsons adopted him. His name became James R. Johnson. The Johnsons were loving people. They went to church and raised James in the Christian faith. James knew he was adopted. He knew he had been separated from his brother. But he still had a decent childhood. He enjoyed living on the farm. He loved animals. He also loved music. When he was not at church or working on his father's farm, he liked to ride his bicycle around town. He would put kittens in the front basket of his bike. James went to school in California, Missouri. In 1967, he graduated from California High School. The Vietnam War was happening at that time. But James was not drafted right away. Instead, he married his high school sweetheart. Her name was Jean Reed. He took his first steps into adult life as a married man. In 1969, James received his draft notice. He was inducted into the United States Army. He hoped he would not be sent to Vietnam. The war was on the nightly news every day, and the thought of going there frightened him. He completed basic training. Then he was sent to Fort Ord in California. He thought he might be able to avoid combat. That did not happen. With less than 1 year left to serve, James was sent to Vietnam. He served as a helicopter pilot. He arrived in Southeast Asia and was placed in a combat zone. On his first day on the battlefield, something terrible happened. His company set out on a night patrol to set an ambush for enemy fighters. United States soldiers spotted 2 enemy fighters and shot them. The gunfire attracted a much larger enemy force that was waiting to attack. James and his fellow soldiers found themselves caught in the middle of gunfire, mortar rounds, and rocket-propelled grenades. Helicopters were called in to pick up the wounded. There were 13 wounded soldiers. Many of them later died. The enemy fired at the rescue helicopters and drove them away. Then a United States jet fighter dropped a large napalm bomb. The The bomb killed dozens of enemy fighters and destroyed the entire area. James helped carry wounded men out of the danger zone. He saw men with legs blown off. He saw the company commander with his legs and part of his genitals blown off by a landmine. The first sergeant was ripped open. It was the worst thing James had ever seen. James served 4 months in active combat in Vietnam. During that time, he saw many frightening and violent events. He did not talk much about these experiences when he returned home, but the memories stayed inside him. While James was in Vietnam, his wife Jean became very sick. Her condition was so severe that James was granted emergency leave. He was also given a hardship discharge so he could come home and take care of her. He returned to Missouri. James and Jean lived with his parents while James got back on his feet. James found work as a sales clerk and auto mechanic at an auto sales business. Later he worked at a company that made pool tables. James and Jean bought a small house in their hometown of California, Missouri. But Jean felt that James had changed. She said he felt like a stranger to her. They grew distant from each other. In 1974, James and Jean divorced. In 1974, after the divorce, James got a good job as a livestock feed salesman for a company called Biozyme, Incorporated. He sold feed to farmers and veterinarians throughout central Missouri and parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Illinois. He was a good worker. His customers liked him. He worked for Biozyme for over 8 years. In 1975, James married a woman named Brenda Summers. That marriage lasted until 1978. They divorced after 3 years. In 1977, while still working as a feed salesman, James joined the Missouri National Guard. His main interest was helicopters. He trained to become a helicopter mechanic. In 1982, he became tired of traveling constantly for his feed sales job. So he left that job and went to work full-time for the National Guard as a helicopter mechanic. He prospered in this job. He earned a reputation as a conscientious and reliable worker. He made good friends there. People found him pleasant to be around. In 1979, James was reunited with his brother Tommy. By that time, Tommy had changed his name to his adoptive father's name. James and Tommy became good friends. Tommy was even the best man at James's next wedding. In 1990, James married a woman named Jerry Weed. They lived together in rural Monteau County, in a house near the town of California, Missouri. Jerry had a 19-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. Her name was Dawn Becker. Dawn came to live with James and Jerry in their home. James continued to be active in his church, Salem Baptist Church in California, Missouri. He sang in the choir. He helped bring new members to the church. He was well thought of in the community. He had no criminal record. People who knew him described him as a good person. He helped others without asking for credit. When a family friend lost everything in a house fire, James started a fund drive anonymously with a $100 bill. When a close friend named Dallas Cooper died in a helicopter crash, James helped the widow and her children. He put the friend's estate in order. He made sure the friend's tools were sold at a fair price. When another friend was away serving in the military during the Persian Gulf crisis, James cut firewood for that friend's family and fixed their car. But there were some signs that James was struggling inside. His wife Jerry later testified that James had been having nightmares for nearly a year. Sometimes he would jump up in the middle of the night, grab his gun, and go outside. You could not approach him without warning him first. Jerry said that if you came up to him announced, you might get decked. In 1990, when tensions rose in the Persian Gulf, James worried that his National Guard unit would be called up. He could not escape the memories of Vietnam. He felt serious anxiety. James also had a difficult relationship with his stepdaughter Dawn. They fought a great deal. Dawn lived in the house with James and Jerry. The tension between James and Dawn grew over time. James became irritable and unhappy. Friends and family began to feel more distant from him. His marriage to Jerry was under strain. Despite these problems, James continued to go to work, go to church, and live his daily life. He had friends who cared about him. One of those friends was a man named Russell Bortz, who worked as a deputy sheriff in Montague County. Just days before the events that would change everything, James joined some friends to play cards. Russell Bortz was there. Bortz later said, "As far as I was concerned then, he was family. You couldn't ask for a better person." On the evening of December 8th, 1991, James Johnson was at his home in rural Montague County with his wife Jerry and his stepdaughter Dawn Becker. James and Dawn began to argue. The argument grew louder and more heated. James cried out that he could not take it anymore. He told his wife that her daughter had to move out of the house. Jerry replied that if Dawn moved out, she would move out too. James then told Jerry to choose between him and her daughter. Jerry chose Dawn. James ordered both women to leave the house. Jerry and Dawn refused to leave. So James produced a loaded rifle. He pointed it at his wife. She did not back down. Then he pointed the rifle at Dawn. She still did not leave. So James grabbed Dawn by the neck in a choke hold. He forced her out of the door. Once she was outside, Dawn ran away from the house and fled to a neighbor's home. She called a teacher, who then called the sheriff's office to report a domestic disturbance. A few minutes after Dawn fled, James loaded some guns and ammunition into his car. He drove away from the house, but he returned a short time later. He had found Dawn and brought her back in the car with him. He told Jerry that he wanted to work things out. Soon after James returned to the house, a deputy sheriff arrived. His name was Leslie Rourke. He was called Les. He worked for the Montague County Sheriff's Department. He had been sent to investigate the domestic disturbance call. Deputy Rourke walked up to the house and asked to speak with Dawn. James refused to let him speak with her. Jerry brought Dawn to the door anyway. Both women told Deputy Rourke that they were fine. There was no problem, they said. Deputy Rourke accepted what they told him. He turned around and started walking back to his patrol car. As Deputy Rourke walked away, James stepped outside onto the porch. He pulled a .38 caliber pistol from the back waistband of his pants. He shot Deputy Rourke twice. One bullet hit the deputy in the rear. One bullet hit him in the back of the hand. Deputy Rourke fell to the ground. James stepped back inside the house. He sat down at the kitchen table. He said, "I'm in trouble now." Then he heard Deputy Rourke moaning in pain from outside. The deputy was still alive. James realized he had not finished killing him. So James went back outside. He stood over Deputy Rourke and shot him one more time. This bullet went into the deputy's forehead. Deputy Leslie Rourke died on the ground outside James's home. James then gathered more ammunition. He also packed a change of clothes and a thermos. He put his guns and the ammunition into his car. He got into the car and drove away from his house. James drove to the home of Sheriff Kenny Jones. Sheriff Jones was the top law enforcement officer in Montague County. His family was having a Christmas party that night. James arrived outside the house. He looked through a window. He saw a group of people inside. He took out a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle. He pointed the rifle through the window and opened fire. One of the people inside was Pam Jones. She was the wife of Sheriff Kenny Jones. She was struck by 5 bullets. One hit her in the shoulder. One hit her in the face. One hit her in the neck. 2 hit her in the back of the head. Pam Jones died at the scene in front of her family. The other people in the house were not killed. James left the Jones home. He drove to the home of Deputy Sheriff Russell Bortz. Deputy Bortz was the same man who had played cards with James just days earlier. James knew him. When James arrived, Deputy Bortz was inside his home talking on the telephone. He was standing near a lighted window. James fired his rifle from outside the house. He shot through the window. He hit Deputy Bortz 4 times. 1 bullet hit the deputy in the hand. 2 bullets hit him in the chest. One bullet hit him in the face. Deputy Bortz fell to the floor. He was badly wounded, but he did not die. He survived the attack. He later had to go through many years of medical treatment for his injuries. After shooting Deputy Bortz, James drove to the Montauk County Sheriff's Office. By that time, many law enforcement officers from Montauk County and nearby counties had gathered at the office. They had heard about the shooting of Deputy Rourke. They were organizing a search for James. Then word came that Deputy Bortz had been shot. The officers rushed out of the sheriff's office to respond. James was outside the office. He was lying in wait. He had positioned himself so he could see the officers as they came out. When the officers emerged, James opened fire with his .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle. One of the officers was Charles Smith. He was the sheriff of Cooper County, which is next to Montauk County. Sheriff Smith was hit 4 times. One bullet hit him in the face. One hit him in the right side. One hit him in the upper back. One hit him in the head. The shot to the head killed him. Sheriff Charles Smith died at the scene. Moments later, another officer arrived at the sheriff's office. Her name was Sandra Wilson. She was a deputy sheriff for Miller County. She stopped her patrol car in the street. She slid across the seat to the passenger side. She started to climb out of the car onto the pavement. James saw her. He had an 8mm bolt-action Mauser rifle. He shot Deputy Wilson once. The bullet went through her heart. She died on the pavement outside her patrol car. James then ran away from the sheriff's office. He went to the home of an elderly woman named Dorothy Mae Miller. He found her back porch. He hid there for the rest of the night. He did not go inside the house at first. He stayed on the porch in the dark. The next morning, December 9th, 1991, James confronted Mrs. Miller. He told her he had shot 5 people. He held her hostage inside her house for most of the day. James was polite to her. He watched television with her. They prayed together for the town and for the people he had shot. At one point, James asked Mrs. Miller for her car so he could leave. She refused. She told him it was the first new car she had ever owned. James did not force her to give him the car. He did not hurt her. That evening, James allowed Mrs. Miller to leave her house. She was expected at a Christmas party. He let her go. After she left, Mrs. Miller went to the party. Then she contacted the authorities. She told them that James Johnson was in her house. After Dorothy Mae Miller contacted the authorities, law enforcement officers went to her house. They surrounded the property. They did not rush inside. Instead, they began talking to James Johnson. They negotiated with him. They asked him to come out and surrender. James listened to them. He agreed to give himself up. He walked out of Mrs. Miller's house and was taken into custody. The date was December 9th, 1991. The hostage situation ended without anyone else being hurt. James Johnson was arrested and taken to jail. He gave a detailed confession. In his confession, he described exactly what he had done. He remembered that his victims were law enforcement officers and the sheriff's wife. He did not claim that he thought they were enemy soldiers. His own words were recorded. On December 10th, 1991, James Johnson was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. The victims were Deputy Leslie Rourke, Pam Jones, Sheriff Charles Smith, and Deputy Sandra Wilson. He was also charged with the attempted murder of Deputy Russell Bortz, who had survived his wounds. The case went to trial in Laclede County, Missouri. The trial began on January 19, 1993. It lasted 10 days. James Johnson did not deny that he had killed 4 people. He admitted the killings. His defense was not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. He claimed that he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, from his time as a combat helicopter pilot in Vietnam. His lawyers argued that on the night of December 8th and 9th, 1991, he was having a flashback. They said he believed he was back in Vietnam and that he was firing at enemy soldiers. To support this defense, James's lawyers wanted to show that he had behaved in ways that matched his wartime training. They told the jury in their opening statement that James had done certain things at his home before the shootings. They said he had set up a perimeter of rope and tin cans to warn him if someone approached. They said he had cooked a baked potato wrapped in foil, the way soldiers eat when they rest between missions. They said he had flattened the tires of his car so the enemy could not use it. These claims turned out to be false. The prosecution called 2 Missouri State Highway Patrol troopers as witnesses. The troopers testified that they had set up the rope and tin cans. They had left the foil wrapper. They had flattened the tires of James's car. They did these things while waiting for James to return to his house after the shootings. The police had done those actions, not James Johnson. The defense lawyers had not interviewed the troopers before the trial. They had assumed James had done those things because the behavior fit their experts' theory. When the prosecution proved that the defense had presented false claims, the jury's trust in the entire PTSD defense was destroyed. The prosecutor later told the jury that the defense had told pure, unadulterated lies. 3 expert witnesses testified for the defense that James suffered from PTSD. The prosecution called its own experts, including a psychologist originally hired by the defense who concluded that James did not have PTSD. The jury also heard James's own confession, in which he described his actions in clear detail without mentioning any confusion about who his victims were. On February 1, 1993, the jury found James Johnson guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder. The same jury then considered whether he should receive the death penalty or life in prison. The prosecution presented aggravating factors. James had killed multiple people, including law enforcement officers, and he had shot Deputy Rourke after the deputy was already down. The defense presented mitigating factors. James had no previous criminal record. He had served his country in Vietnam, and he had mental problems. The jury decided that the aggravating factors outweighed the mitigating factors. They recommended the death penalty on all 4 counts. On April 23, 1993, the judge sentenced James Johnson to death for each of the 4 murders. After his sentence, James was sent to death row at the Potosi Correctional Center in Missouri. He appealed his conviction and sentence. On August 26, 1993, he filed a post-conviction motion for relief in the circuit court. That court denied his motion on October 10, 1996. James then appealed to the Missouri State Supreme Court. On April 30, 1998, the Missouri Supreme Court affirmed his conviction and sentence. 4 judges voted to uphold the death penalty. 1 judge, Ronnie White, dissented. Judge White wrote that James's defense lawyers had performed poorly by failing to interview the troopers. He said that mistake destroyed the credibility of the PTSD defense before the defense even presented its case. He argued that James should receive a new trial, but the majority of the court disagreed. They said the defense theory was weak to begin with, and James's detailed confession showed he knew what he was doing. James then took his case to the federal courts. On October 15, 1999, he filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus in the United States District Court. The district court denied his petition on February 23, 2000. He appealed to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. On June 14, 2000, the 8th Circuit declined to review the denial. He then asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case. On March 19, 2001, the Supreme Court denied his petition. On December 11, 2001, the Missouri State Supreme Court set an execution date. James Johnson was scheduled to die by lethal injection on January 9, 2002. In the years he spent on death row, James Johnson became active in the prison ministry. He worked as a chaplain's assistant. He led chapel music. He helped set up religious services and programs. He counseled other inmates. Prison staff and volunteers spoke well of him. He said he had found God and wanted to help others. His lawyers asked Governor Bob Holden to commute his sentence to life in prison without parole. They argued that James was a model prisoner and that the crimes were an anomaly caused by PTSD. The governor did not grant clemency. On January 9, 2002, James R. Johnson was executed by lethal injection at the state prison in Missouri. He was 52 years old. He was the first murderer executed in the United States in 2002 and the 750th murderer executed in the United States since the death penalty was resumed in 1976. Before he died, James Johnson was asked if he had any final words. He said, "To the families of Leslie Rourke, Pam Jones, Charles Smith, and Sandra Wilson, I am profoundly sorrowful for taking their lives. I know that I caused irreparable damage to each surviving family member. I earnestly pray for your forgiveness." He also said that he would meet Jesus, his Lord and Savior, face to face. His final meal was steak, French fries, and a salad. The families of the victims continued to live with their losses. Pam Jones's mother thought about her grandchildren growing up without their mother. Sheriff Kenny Jones raised his children alone while continuing his duties as sheriff. Deputy Russell Bortz survived his wounds but endured years of medical care. The law enforcement community remembered the night of terror in Monteau County. James Johnson's brother and friends mourned the man they had known before December 9, 1991. The case ended with James Johnson's execution, but the pain caused by his actions did not end. For people were dead because of one night of violence, and no sentence could bring them back. The story of James R. Johnson closed on January 9, 2002, when he took his last breath in the execution chamber in Potosi, Missouri.